Okay, we are recording right now, and welcome everybody. From my side, I am Livia Serrao, a PhD student here in the University of Trento. Thanks for coming in person and online. And I will give the floor to Professor Marco Bezzi, who is introduced us the webinar cycle and conference cycle, ESICs. And then I will introduce you also the speakers of today, and enjoy the entire session.
So welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I'm Marco Bezzi. I'm a professor here at the University of Trento and member of the UNESCO chair in Engineering for Human and Sustainable Development. And it's a pleasure to invite you again to this second edition of ESIC, Environmental Sustainability and International Cooperation Seminars, with the aim to explore together with the actors of the international cooperation and researcher several environmental challenges. So with the previous appointment, we were speaking about energy poverty, we were speaking about agri-food supply chain, and it's a pleasure today to speak about circular economy. So after this very short introduction, I will give the floor again to Livia for the introduction of the speakers, and then we will speak again together at the end.
Okay, then the first speaker today is the Catherine Weetman, who is an international speaker, advisor, and host of a Circular Economy podcast. She founded Rethink Global and wrote a very helpful handbook, whose title is a Circular Economy Handbook: How to Build a More Resilient, Competitive, and Sustainable Business. And the second edition recently was published, and Ms. Catherine Weetman will have 20 minutes to discuss today, and then we will have the second speaker, and then time to discuss together the content of the two speech of them. So, Ms. Weetman, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Livia. Okay, so can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Just going to move the Zoom toolbar out of my line of sight. So thank you for that introduction, and thanks to the University of Trento for inviting me along to talk about the circular economy. But I'm going to start with some bad news. Business as usual is destined to fail. The way we live, work and invest is not fit for the future. Even if you're already using some circular economy solutions, it's not enough. Sorry, I can't. Having trouble getting my slides to move on. Might have to go for the. Okay, sorry. So even if you're already using some circular economy solutions, that's not enough. Today I'm going to talk about exponential trends, ostriches, and why we need factor 50 solutions. And first, I'd like to share this from an essay by Anthony Painter of the RSA. Written from the point of view of someone living around 60 years into the future. The philosopher Roman Krznaric says we're colonizing the future. Lots of things are accelerating at an ever faster rate. The changes are exponential and they're still accelerating. And we humans haven't evolved to think exponentially. We tend to develop gradual, incremental solutions, and that's not enough to meet the challenges we face. These are now turning into emergencies, interconnected crises of climate, resources, social inequality, and the death of nature. And we've seen with COVID what exponential growth looks like, with COVID infections doubling every week or so, and then every few days. And we know what happens when we act to deal with those exponential curves, and what happens when we don't act. But when the doubling is over decades or even centuries, then we don't react. These charts are from a blog a few years ago on the World Economic Forum website by Owen Gaffney of the Stockholm Resilience Centre. And they're charts showing human progress. They all have the same timeline, starting in 1750, the beginning of the first industrial revolution, and ending today. And on each of them you can just about see a faint line marking 1950, the beginning of what's called the Great Acceleration, when we started using fossil fuel fertilizers and we got much better at healthcare and sanitation. And you can see that all those charts follow the same exponential upward trend, whether we're looking at world population growth, gross domestic product, GDP, the production of paper, and even tourism. So we shouldn't be surprised when we look at these charts showing human impact on the world to see that they follow the same exponential upward patterns. We've got the greenhouse gas levels at the top, we've got ozone levels, ocean acidification, deforestation, and so on. So we're using things up, we're creating lots of damage, and it's all accelerating. And in effect, we've created a waste economy. Every single year we put around 100 billion tonnes of resources into the economy, together with 4.5 billion cubic metres of water. And all that production and consumption is responsible for over 90% of biodiversity loss and over 90% of water stress around the world. We send an awful lot of useful resources to waste or landfill, or we burn them, incinerate them. They're gone forever. But of course that doesn't count all the waste and pollution into the soil, air, atmosphere and water all along the process. And the systems of production and consumption are responsible for over half of global greenhouse gas emissions. And we're really poor at getting things back into the system after we've finished using them. Less than 9% of what we've finished using comes back to be made into new products. And the Global Footprint Network makes it clear. Every year since 1970, we've been using the resources of more than one planet to fuel our lifestyles. We overshoot the biocapacity. And things are becoming less fair. Wealthy societies and big businesses are consuming far more than their fair share of resources and destroying the living world that we all depend on. And yet predictions show that we're going to use much, much more. We can already see that a sustainable level of resources was back at around 1970 levels. And if we zoom in to this chart showing resource consumption since 1972, we can see how exponential it is. We've doubled the amount of resources we use in the last 50 years, and it's predicted to double again by 2060, with each of us worldwide using 30% more resources, as we buy more things and throw them away ever more quickly. We all want more stuff. But that waste economy that we've created has massive effects on people all around the world, on societies who have to live with all this waste, and of course on nature. We're poisoning the very earth that we depend on. And why are we wasting so much? Generally because every company is trying to make things cheaper and persuade us to buy more. Douglas Rushkoff highlights the problem for that. problem of that. Every time we want to make something cheaper, somebody or something gets exploited. And I think there are three key business models that modern businesses use to try and persuade us to consume more. More and more sectors are adopting the fast fashion model, with building in trends for things like furniture, cars and tech. Secondly, they want to encourage us to have sole use of everything, exclusivity. We now want a TV in every room in the house instead of having a TV that we used to share. We want our own power drill instead of sharing one with our neighbours. And the third way they're doing that is making things to be disposable, so we use them once and then throw them away. And so how are we going to bend the curve on all that exponential use of resources and exponentially growing waste and pollution? We need factor 50 solutions. Incremental changes, a few more sustainable materials, a bit of recycled content, that's not enough. Instead, I think we need to use three key circular strategies to really shrink that production and consumption footprint. The first one is all about product design. We need to design products that we can use for much, much longer. They need to be durable, repairable and upgradable. The second thing is to create systems that allow us to share things so that we can rent, pay per use, use subscription services and so on. And for both of those strategies, once we finish using something, we need to get it back into the system so it can be used by somebody else. So reselling, repairing if necessary, and even remaking, remanufacturing. And finally, when something's come to the end of its useful life, that's when we recover it to get it back into the system to be made into new products through recycling. But recycling needs to be our last resort. It's very energy intensive and often it uses chemicals, and we lose an awful lot of the value of the materials in the product through the process of recycling. So let's look at a few examples. First of all, that first strategy of fast to slow. And let's start with Fairphone. And here's my 2016 Fairphone 2, still going strong. Fairphone was designed to be durable and rugged. So when I've dropped it on our stone floors at home, it's not broken, unlike my husband's iPhone. I think he's gone through three phones since 2016. And because it's designed based on modules, it means it's really easy to repair. If something goes wrong, I go onto the Fairphone website, I do a quick diagnostic, and then I order the part online, and when it arrives, I need just a single screwdriver to repair the phone. And the Fairphone's also upgradable, so if I decide I want a better camera lens, again I can order that online and upgrade from a 6 megapixel to a 12 megapixel. You might have heard of the global repair community iFixit. They're one of the organisations campaigning for a right to repair. iFixit says, you bought it, you should own it. And that's, and then a full stop. And they're working on our right to repair so that we can use, modify and repair things however we want. It seems wrong that we've paid to buy something and then we can't even get into it to repair it. And they also remind us that repair helps create meaningful jobs in local communities. So there are just a couple of examples, but if we look at what happens to the product footprint, we can see that extending the product life creates value and reduces impacts. To use a simple example, if I replace my t-shirt every couple of years, then over a 6-year period I'd have consumed 3 t-shirts. Keeping them for 3 years means I reduce my manufacturing footprint by 1/3. And there are significant benefits for both customers and for the company. Moving on to that second strategy, instead of wanting exclusive ownership of things, we can develop a mindset that's more about having access to things, using things instead of needing to own them. So sharing, renting and pay per use. Subscription and rentals are taking off all around the world in lots of different sectors. And that's from both startups and existing businesses. Grover in Germany rents laptops, entertainment and sports equipment. And Homey in the Netherlands provides pay-per-use home appliances with a pricing model that encourages people to use less energy and water. After a few weeks of using pay-per-use appliances, people were using 30% less energy and water. IKEA is saying it's going to try renting across 30 countries and it's experimenting with buyback models in several places. And there are exchange and sharing platforms for business-to-business transactions too. They act as a kind of translation dictionary between one company and another. So companies can share or reuse things like equipment, real estate, consumables, and even people. And we're seeing lots of ways that communities can use sharing and pay-per-use to redistribute assets and share skills. So we've got repair cafes all around the world. Libraries of things are springing up in towns everywhere. They can rent things like tools, sports equipment, things for hobbies, and also help with skill sharing. And that's another feature that's getting going, particularly through the pandemic, as communities have connected and started to share their skills and time. There are community energy projects, particularly in Germany. This is really popular, and it's a way to generate local energy and bring money back into the community. And of course we've got lots of community food initiatives helping avoid the big problem of food waste. And then there's mobility. You don't have to rent a car from Uber. You can buy into a community car sharing app instead. So what items could you share or rent instead of owning? A typical car in Europe is parked up for 92% of every day. So we use it for less than 2 hours. In a car share system, it's easy to increase the hours of use for each car over a 24-hour period. Let's take an example where we've got 4 families. They're using the car for commuting, to go shopping, maybe to do a school run or go to the gym. If instead they subscribe to a car share system, they'd be able to share 1 car, so reducing the footprint by 75%. And again, lots of benefits for both the customers and the company. And then our third strategy is moving from single use and disposability into making sure everything has a second life, a third life, and lots of subsequent lives. One of my podcast guests, Algramo, a startup from Chile, provides reusable packaging in convenience stores for household products, pet food, and much more. And reusing product helped make the product more affordable. So before the reusable packaging, the product was typically 40% more expensive than buying the same product from a supermarket. Now the Algramo solution makes it cheaper than the supermarket. And it's also more convenient, eliminating the need to recycle the packaging. And that's a really big benefit in countries that don't have household waste collections. Algramo is now expanding worldwide, working with big brands including Unilever and Purina. And I'm presenting this to you from a remanufactured Dell laptop that I bought from Circular Computing last summer. It cost around half as much as a new one, and it's got pretty much the same performance. Circular Computing mainly sells to organisations rather than consumers, but it helps their customers reduce both their footprint and the costs. And earlier this year, Circular Computing were awarded a BSI Kite Mark, and that certifies them as providing laptops that are as reliable as a new one. And another thing we can do is think about reducing the amount of water and wasted parts of products. So you probably know that most household cleaning products, shampoos, shower gels and so on, consist mostly of water. Typically it's around 80%. So although reusable packaging is one solution, going for a concentrated or a solid product would be even better. So you buy the packaging just once, or even better, use a jar you already have or a bottle that you already have, and then get the concentrate. This particular example is in toxic-free dissolvable packaging. So that means you can get the refills by post and avoid even needing to go to the supermarket. So a big improvement on the logistics footprint of the whole product. So what are the upsides? For customers, it reduces the cost of the product or service. It can improve access to the product and reduces people's personal ecological footprint. And it means you can choose to do businesses with companies that share your values. And there are lots of benefits for the planet and for society. Those smaller footprints are obviously much better for the planet, with big reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. And I'd say using the circular economy is the only way we're going to get to net zero. There's no other way of doing it unless we change our systems. And for businesses, it can reduce costs and open up new services and revenue streams, many of which are helping to engage new customers. And doing the right thing improves your brand value, so you might then save on marketing costs. So our system now is inefficient, wasteful and damaging. And often we don't see the results of all that waste. We send it somewhere else. But the Global Footprint Network makes it clear. We need to change that system. We need to get back to much lower levels of consumption. And those of us who have high spending patterns and are using up lots of stuff probably need to make the biggest changes. But the circular economy means we don't have to have a lower level of lifestyle. We just need to choose to do things differently, choosing products that last for longer and are repairable, choosing to share and rent things instead of needing to own things, and making sure that everything we buy can have another life when we finish using it. So, resource extraction and processing is responsible for over 90% of water stress and biodiversity loss. And over 90% of the products we make are wasted at the end of use. And generation of resources is expected to increase massively over the next 30 years. That footprint is growing exponentially. Marginal gains, doing a bit less bad, banning a few single-use plastics is not enough. We need factor 50 solutions that create a different mindset and change the system. And so I'd like to finish with this famous quote from the economist Kenneth Boulding. And his paper from 1966 is well worth reading. And he explains the difference between open systems and closed systems, highlighting our delusion that we live in an open system. We think somehow that resources come in from outside the system and that pollution and waste is dealt with somewhere else. When we think locally, that's possible, but of course at a global level it can't possibly work like that. It's now clear we're in a closed system with limited resources and limited sinks for our waste. And as Boulding said, that means exponential growth can't continue. We need a different mindset and a different and more sustainable system. So, do we want to choose factor 50 solutions, or do we want to stick our heads in the sand and be an ostrich, ignoring the problem until it gets much, much worse? And we might wonder why we're choosing to do that. Margaret Heffernan, in her book Willful Blindness, says she's examining what makes us blind and why we're all susceptible to it. And in terms of climate change, she says our consumption habits are shared with all those people around us, and that makes us blind to the costs of those habits. So, do we want to be seen as the ostrich generation by our grandchildren, or do we want to be seen as those who started to see clearly, to see that business as usual is only working for the elites? We're using up precious resources, wasting money, destroying nature, health and livelihoods. Business as usual is a threat to society, to peace and well-being, as we're seeing at the moment, and for future generations, and of course for all of us. The future of our communities depends on all of our actions, our factor 50 solutions. So instead of focusing on how big the problem is, let's think about how big the solution could be. If you'd like to find out more, there are some links to the podcast, and you can buy my book at any good bookstore, or get in touch via the website or via LinkedIn. Thanks very much, and I'll hand back to Livia.
Many thanks, Catherine. It was really interesting, and also thanks for the wide introduction to the circular economy topic. And I really enjoy that you showed us how many pathways exist right now to address a different system of consumption. So thanks, and I can wait to discuss there later. And now we can switch to the second speaker. And Guglielmo Mazzà is a former student of our university. He is an environmental engineer, and he recently co-founded the Refuse, which is a social enterprise based in Beirut, in Lebanon. And today he will speak about it, and he will present us his experience on the circular economy topic based in a developing country, let's say. So Guglielmo, the floor is yours, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Livia, for the introduction, and thanks everyone. So first thing, Livia, if I go over time, please kindly advise me and stop me. So
okay, fine.
Way too much. So I will start from a bit far from where I am now. It's still Lebanon, in the mountains, 5 kilometers away from Syria's border. And this is the place I visited the first time I came to Lebanon. So thanks to the University of Trento and the program Talete, I came to Lebanon for my master's thesis on waste management in protracted displacement emergencies. And to understand the situation inside this displacement emergencies, I lived in exactly this refugee camp on this road in one of these tents for 4 months. It was an extremely tough experience. It gave me the chance to live together with Syrian and Palestinian refugees for quite a long winter to see what humanitarian response means, what it needs to improve, and why it's not working in most projects I've witnessed. So why Lebanon? Refugees are a quite hot topic in this period, unfortunately. Lebanon is the country with the world's highest refugee rate, meaning that every 2 persons, there's a refugee in the country. So 1 in 3 is a refugee, either Syrian or Palestinian. The refugee crisis added a population of 2 million in a country that is as big as Trentino. So imagine the size, with an increase in the waste production by 15%. So the key issue is how the country handled this extra waste. 50% of this waste was disposed in uncontrolled landfills, often burned. 35% was disposed in the only 5 sanitary landfills that were constructed in the country, which are defined sanitary landfills, but are built in areas that in Europe would be considered illegal for the realization of a landfill. And 15% is undergoing recovery. The key issue is that this waste is a threat to people and the ecosystem they live in. So it causes animal breeding, gas release, fire risk, which is quite often witnessed in refugee camps due to the presence of waste, health hazards, pollution, flooding. One of the key issues in Lebanon due to waste is tension. So there's a competition between municipalities on waste management due to the different confessional religions that each municipality recognizes. So each municipality refuses to deal with the waste of another community of another neighborhood because they have a different religious background. Moreover, the refugee community is residing mainly in agricultural areas, and their presence contributed to the pollution of the areas where they settled in, by necessity, of course, not because they wanted to. And this led to a very strong increase in tension, with over 160,000 refugees under eviction threat because of waste pollution in 2019. One of the direct results is this: refugee camps are often surrounded by waste, meaning that the population is directly exposed to the issues that it causes. This is another effect. This was quite next to my refugee camp when I was in Lebanon. The whole area got flooded because after a storm, all the channels got stuck, got filled with waste, and the whole valley was completely underwater. Informal collection is one of the main responses present in the country, particularly due to the high poverty of the refugee population. So there's a widespread presence of informal pickers around the country. And the response of international cooperation was in the implementation of traditional solid waste management schemes. This was one of the sanitary landfills that was built between the fence and the landfill. There's Lebanon's main river. So not really built in the most appropriate solutions, also with funding from cooperation agencies from Europe, United States, and so on. The European Union, for instance, allocated a budget of over 89 million for building mechanical biological treatment facilities throughout Lebanon, resulting in the production of outputs which are illegally used in Lebanon as per the European law. So according to the European regulations, we cannot produce compost out of mixed waste, according to the regulations we are developing, and we cannot call it compost. We have to define it compost-like outputs because it's full of chemicals, it's full of pollutants inside, and there's no way to take them out of the organic waste with my mechanical biological treatment. Nevertheless, European Union invested in 20 recycling facilities that operate with mechanical biological treatment throughout Lebanon. Again, a country as big as Trentino Adige, so not really in need for 20 facilities, resulting in the direct provision of compost to farmers for free, polluting fields, and now having a population of farmers refusing to use compost in any future project where they previously received this contaminated material. So the response by the international cooperation was not really effective. Another key aspect was the provision of bins. They spread bins throughout the country, claiming that 98% of the country was covered with the presence of bins. The only issue is that when you fund an international cooperation project, it can last for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years if it's a long-term program. So the collection of these of the waste from bins was never prosecuted after the termination of projects because of the high cost. We started thinking about refuse in 2019, me and a group of crazy visionary people. And in 2019 in Lebanon, the October Revolution started due to a very strong financial crisis. So it resulted in protests throughout the countries with people on the streets occupying roads, ministries, anything related to the government, to fight against the sectarian government that rules the country and that is highly and, as everyone knows, corrupted. The result is that the country has now a 93% currency devaluation. So imagine if whatever you own in your bank was frozen and devalued by 93%, meaning you have nothing left. And 80% of the population below the poverty line, according to the latest World Bank report. There's fuel shortages, there's no imports of fuel, so it's extremely hard to rely on this source, and power cuts are extremely common. Beirut went through different phases. In August, we had electricity just for 1 hour a day. Now we have electricity, but just thanks to private generators, and so relying on fuel when it's available. Key issue is that waste is not only in refugee camps, it's everywhere. This is Beirut, and the response, as we mentioned, and of the provision of bins is not effective. It doesn't engage the population. It doesn't create enough awareness. And several organizations are investing in home collection. So getting vehicles to go to everyone's home to avoid the bins, to make sure that the distance from between people and the collectors is covered. But they face extremely high operational costs because of the shortages of fuel. Plus, they contribute to another key issue of Beirut, which is traffic. So when we started thinking about refuse, one of the first thought we had was waste bins, no thanks. So if you want to create a traditional sorting scheme, what you do is that you spread bins, you buy garbage trucks, extremely expensive and imported, also including the spare parts needed for operating them. You have to educate and involve people, and you have to go and collect the recyclables daily when there's fuel. It takes huge investments, particularly for waste trucks and sorting facilities, and awareness is extremely slow. So what we thought was, how do we shift the paradigm? How do we make people sort and bring recyclables to us instead of going and collect throughout the city, or throughout informal refugee camps, or throughout whichever area we want to serve. So we started with a market assessment, and what we decided is that the pull factor for people would have been the value of recyclables itself. So Refuse runs recyclables collection points. These recyclables collection points are small-scale facilities which fit into the size of a normal shop that we open in very dense communities, and where we welcome users to bring their sorted, clean materials. We collect in these places several types of recyclables, which we then trade with local industries and buyers. Most of these materials are recycled in Lebanon. Not all the materials are recycled in Lebanon because of a lack of industries. For instance, metals are exported to Turkey. And the value of whatever we collect is shared back with the community. So we reward the community for the sorting effort and the transportation of recyclables. This is the example of the first recyclables collection points we opened. It was a bakery which failed due to the crisis. We renovated the space and we simply built some bins. We have a scale. Everything that is dropped by our clients is scaled. We monitor each transaction through a software we developed so that we can upload the value directly on the account of the users that bring the waste to us. Our users went from 0 sorting to sorting more than 15 types of materials. So there's a community in Beirut that differentiates more than 15 types of materials and 7 types of plastics. These are some of the materials we collect. So we measure every fraction. We assign a price according to the market value currently available in the Lebanese market, depending on the currency, on the quality, on the volume. And the resources we generate are 50% going back to the community and 50% helping us to cover operations and making our business viable. People can decide whether to cash in their reward, so they can accumulate it on their personal account. No need to have a smartphone if they want to register, of course. Or they can decide to use the value they collect to fund community initiatives. So Refuse launched a Trash for Good platform, which allows NGOs, communities, groups, whoever wants to initiate any community activity that fits into our environmental and social criteria can collect resources through recyclables, engaging the networks and helping us spread awareness throughout their communities. We started through an incubator for startups at MIT in Boston, not really close to Lebanon. And we then joined at least 5 more incubators. It's a never-ending process to learn and adapt in understanding how to build a viable company. We started our minimum viable product, so our pilot phase in December 1st, collecting data and building our financial plan and financial projections for the future. And for now, we serve over 2,000 people. We collect, as I said, more than 15 types of recyclables. We gave the community more than $1,000 of cashback, and with a devaluation of 93% of the market value, you can imagine how much it means for the community we serve. Aim of this year is closing this pilot phase and establishing 3 new collection points. We already have funding secured for the 2 next collection points. We are working on the identification of the right communities right now. We want to diversify the services offered in these spaces. So these spaces were designed with the community that we serve. We engage them in the first phases of the establishment of the collection point. And now, since we have a regular population coming daily to us, so we have around 200 people coming every day to drop their recyclables at our collection points, we're thinking about what we can offer to these people, not only in terms of recyclables collection. And later on, expanding to other countries. We have Syria pending and Jordan. We have contacts with Kenya, potential collaborations in Italy, and we want to reach a much wider population with this service. We incorporated, which sounds easy, but I swear it's not so easy in Lebanon, meaning we got a Ministry of Finance number from this country, a country in which all the banking system stopped working in 2019. So it's a very important achievement for us. I know it doesn't sound so needed for others, but we started working, and through the software we can monitor our performance monthly. We had a very rapid growth in the beginning phase without any kind of marketing. We are now planning several community initiatives to engage our community. And this is what happens daily in our collection points. They get filled with stuff from clients. Whatever we can, we press it, we compress it. If not, we store it in bags and we send it to local recycling factories. As you can see, it's a normal shop inside the community, and we aim to spread as many as we can throughout Beirut first, and then who knows where. We started in 4, 1 Lebanese and 3 Italians working abroad. And now we are definitely expanding the team. It's expanding much faster than we thought. We have a business development officer, we have a communication expert, IT experts, and software developers. Sorry, the slides are proceeding on their own. And we are planning our longer term investments. Don't know why slides are moving. For the next 2 years, we plan a capital expenditure of at least $100,000 in facilities and machineries, meaning that we need to raise at least $400,000 for operations and management to be able to expand to several collection points, build a warehouse, purchase our own transportation truck, and initiate community engagement activities. So from a very small project, we started with $10,000 with a grant from Boston, MIT. Hopefully we will grow and become a stable, viable business, only relying on recyclables and not counting on grants. Getting closer to what Catherine was talking about. What are the services and products we tested? So for sure, cash for trash. So receiving recyclables from the community we serve and giving back rewards, financial rewards. Trash for good, so using this money to fund community initiatives. what we saw is that through the recyclables we collect, in the sorting process of the recyclables we collect, we can divert several items which are actually second-hand items. There's no need to classify them as waste. So a high volume of recyclables is directly sold on spot after a bit cleaning and minor repair to the community we serve. We sell items at so-called micro prices, making them accessible to the most vulnerable members of the community. So we have a very high demand for recycled items. And as you can see, we are starting to accept recyclables. Not sure if anyone reads Arabic yet. And then we are thinking about the services and products that we want to develop through these collection points. So as I mentioned, these are community spaces in which we already have a client base coming back every day. So the first negotiation we have is with a local startup producing organic soap. So we will have a refill station for soaps inside our first collection point. We are negotiating a collaboration to also collect organic waste and promote composting of sorted at source organic fractions. And then we want to kickstart a repair service and cleaning service inside our warehouse as soon as we will have funding. The key issue that we have is how to foster a circular economy in a financial crisis. So it's quite easy to switch to certain products when resources are available, particularly money. It's for us as clients. The only issue is how do we make sustainable services in a community that doesn't have financial resources to purchase almost anything. So that's an open question, and hopefully we'll get an answer in the short term. So thank you very much. Here my contacts, and as we mentioned, as we always say as Refuse, don't call it waste, make it valuable.
Perfectly on time, Guglielmo. Thanks for showing us your experience, circular economy experience from inside, let's say. And I personally think that your experience is very remarkable because, I mean, you are trying to make your best in a very complex situation, in a very complex system. And it was really interesting, I think. So now we have time to discuss with the audience about your presentations, and if someone has some questions or curiosities or want just to share its opinion on that, please don't feel afraid about it. And thanks again for both of you speakers, because it was really interesting. And we have also the microphone from the okay, fine then. Does one want to break the ice or?
We can break the ice, Livia.
Okay. Do you have a question, Guglielmo?
First feedback from my side is, according to the presentation by Catherine, we are far behind. So Beirut is at a different stage from the world we live in Europe. So Refuse is a buffer solution for now. It's a buffer solution for a country that has a very wide problem in terms of financial resources, social issues, and environmental problems. So Refuse is the buffer. So it's the in-between solution that is a bit far from the protective layer that Catherine was suggesting. So this should open this could open the discussion to where we need to intervene with rapid solutions, where we need to intervene with longer term solutions which are sustainable since the beginning. So I'm accusing myself.
I think you make a really good point, Guglielmo, and I made a note when you were presenting to link you up with people at Algramo, because Algramo was established to solve the poverty tax. You know, they created the reusable packaging specifically to do that, having realised that people in the poor areas in Chile, people living in you know, very dense housing or even favelas, were having to shop at convenience stores and were paying much more per gram of product than people who were able to take their car to the supermarket, and had the added problem of what to do with the end of use packaging. So that solution is scaling out to countries around the world. So I think those kind of solutions, whereby creating a more circular system enables people to get better value of the product inside the system. You know, if we're eliminating the packaging, then we can save the cost of the packaging and waste. And I think things like repair cafes and sharing systems, there are lots of ways now that digital solutions and apps can connect people to each other, and allow us to get a lot more use out of everything. But of course we need the products to be repairable in the first place, don't we? And that's one of the challenges. But skill sharing and making sure, as you're starting to do, selling second-hand things, and getting people to be more creative, you know, is the way to go. Sometimes I talk about the circular economy by default. When we look back at how things happened in Europe in the 1950s, you know, we didn't waste things. I've only just helped my parents replace the oven, the hob, and their fridge that they bought in the 1970s. So they've lasted for 50 years. So we businesses know how to make things that last. It's businesses that are choosing to make them disposable instead. That's what we've got to campaign against.
Indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Guglielmo. Also, from my side, I'm really impressed both about the real picture presented from Catherine, that is a terrific, but especially I'm really impressed about how many solutions we could have to improve the situation. So, and I think that your solution, Guglielmo, is really, really interesting, and I'm really proud that you were a student of the University of Trento, and you were a student also of the Talete program. So it's a pleasure for Trento to have a student that establish a company like Refuse. And probably the critical point probably is the shifting paradigm in the people mind. So how to change the mind. And so I have a question also for Catherine. So did you start, Catherine, also to teach to young people, the school, or what could we do to accelerate the paradigm in the people? So probably from the young people, but how? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm just working on my next book at the moment, and I'm looking at some of the social trends, and I think it's really interesting to see that the millennial generation and then Gen Zs are much more interested in sustainability, but also want to buy from companies that really share their values, and are much more inclined to vote both with their activities on social media, so calling out bad behaviour, calling out lack of transparency and greenwash, and also making sure that they spend their money, you know, to kind of align with their values. So that's really encouraging, but of course we need much more of that. And I've just been reading a book about the kind of the shift from consumers to citizens. So when we look back at what's happened, probably since the First World War, we've been encouraged to be consumers, and now as marketing gets ever more sophisticated, you know, we're effectively manipulated. Somebody once said to me, don't underestimate the number of highly qualified PhD students at Facebook and Google, all, you know, working out ways to get more of your attention. And that kind of sophisticated behavioral psychology is happening in every single big company. So they're all encouraging us to think that our needs, our psychological needs, are going to be satisfied by buying more stuff. And of course it never is. So we have to buy more stuff and we're still not satisfied. So I think the most important thing that anybody can do is start to understand how marketing works and start to recognize when we're being manipulated and choose to not be manipulated, choose to do things differently and do things in a way that helps everybody around the world have access to what they need.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. I have also a question for Guglielmo. How do you think that your business is scalable? So which are the next steps to make it scalable internationally or even worldwide?
So we are trying to build a franchising model first for collection points, so that we will provide a service for the collection of recyclables and management software to anyone who wants to open the business throughout the country, throughout Lebanon first. And we will then expand the franchise model to other countries. This is our, let's say, horizontal strategy to spread throughout the city. But we also aim to invest in a processing facility. Right now, the only processing we do for recyclables is pressing, so reducing the volume. But the processing we can do is shredding, washing, melting, producing chips, directly producing products on our own. And this will increase the value of the recyclables for us and for the community that brings them to us. So a vertical investment into a value chain of recyclables will follow. And then anything that diversifies our business model. So as I was mentioning, we will aim to transform these collection points into what we defined eco hubs, where we also provide a repair station, repair services. We trade second-hand items or selected products from sustainable producers locally. And these particularly increases the viability of the collection point. So this would be another option to scale.
Thank you, William.
Pleasure.
I don't know if there are questions from the room here in Trento, probably.
Or online.
Hello, can I ask a question to Guglielmo? Yeah, first of all, I found really interesting. Actually, I'm sorry I didn't really know about your project so far, and I found it really that it could possibly have succeed in a very positive way, especially for this situation. So I was wondering, like, from your perspective, in growing this, let's say, this approach you have, what would you find as main limiting factor? I was thinking, for instance, some example, I don't know, maybe the economical sustainability, maybe the infrastructure that is not so, or maybe the mentality of the people, or some institutional limits. Probably they are all, but I don't know if you can give us some example of some limiting factor that you see for the developing of the project. Thank you very much.
So the key limiting factor we see is in our mission. So our mission is to promote zero waste, but we're incentivizing waste somehow. At least the perception is that we're incentivizing waste production. So the key issue is, how do we avoid promoting the production of recyclables while the main aim is avoiding littering and everything that is not recyclable in the market. So the key barrier is understanding what's refuse 2.0, knowing that refuse 1.0 should expire, should get extinguished at some point. So how do we build an infrastructure that is flexible enough to now collect recyclables but later on collect reusable items only and provide a lease model and provide a, I don't know, work on in the collection of anything that will be simply washed and reused, not really thrown. So this is the key factor. Then other component, I mean, we're in Lebanon, so anything that is related to cooperation with authorities is an issue. So we are proceeding with the registration of the company as an environmental operator with the Ministry of the Environment, which requires several stages as it's forecasted in Europe. So a strategic environmental evaluation, environmental impact assessment, and so on. The only issue is that ministries are open at sometimes once per week, 1 day per week, because of the lack of fuel and of salaries, because no one gets paid anymore from the government. So key barrier is anything related to legal aspects. It took us 6 months to incorporate a company just because the Ministry of Finance is never open. So quite a significant bottleneck.
Thank you. Though I see the first version as a really good achieve. Of course, nice to have like perspective on further steps. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I also see 2 questions from Catherine.
Yeah.
So about the funding split, how much is going into community projects compared to cash to the collectors? So right now, almost 90% is going to cash collectors. A very small component is going to community projects, but we never really launched a marketing campaign for the Trash for Good because the software is set, ready, running, but not users don't have the application on their own to choose to have the function to donate. It's still under development. We have a prototype. The prototype should be ready tomorrow. No, in 2 days, on the 8th. So we're close, we're close. An interesting figure is that out of the 90% that we give back in cash to people, 15% last month was given back as secondhand. So instead of getting cash, people chose items from our secondhand shelves and purchased directly items with that cash. So this is what we aim to do. Instead of giving back cash, let's increase as much as we can the fraction that is given back as valuable items or sustainable products or services in the future, who knows. Second question, do you see the potential for policy changes to tax packaging and other commonly wasted products or to pressure brands to reduce the low value materials in the packaging? Yes, I really think it's a need. I definitely think that a taxation on packaging is needed. Italy at some point was close to introduce a system for a sort of carbon tax on packaging, but it was hindered by industrial organizations. So we had a backslash due to the push of producers in our country. In Lebanon, we are definitely far from that. But what we can do is pressure from clients towards brands. This is something we can easily do once we build a community. It's very common to see the types of recyclables that people bring to us, which they think are recyclable, but they're not. So several types of plastic packagings are not recyclables. For instance, coffee bags, packaging. It has several layers, so it's not recyclables, but people are convinced it is. So they get very frustrated when they bring it to us and we reject it because it's not actually possible to recycle it in Lebanon. So we can count on this frustration to have the pressure of the community, and hopefully we will soon.
If we've got time, I'd just like to share a story about those multiple layer foil packets, because the same thing is used for crisp packets. So 2 or 3 years ago in the UK, one of the big crisp brands, Walker's Crisps, which is owned by PepsiCo. There'd been a social media campaign to ask them to make the crisp packets recyclable, and after quite a while they said they would, but I think it was by 2025 or something, so it's quite a long way off. And people got more and more agitated and, you know, were complaining on social media, and Walker's Crisps just kept ignoring it. And then somebody found out that if you had a complaint about the crisps in the packet, you could send back the packet of crisps using free post. So Walker's would pay the postage, and that free post address got circulated with to encourage everybody to send their empty crisp packets back, which started quite quickly, and the post office in the UK had to appeal to the BBC to put a message out asking people not to do that. And so within a couple of weeks, Walker's Crisps had partnered with TerraCycle, you know, the global recycling company, and they'd come up with a solution for those crisp packets. So yeah, the power of social media.
Yeah.
We need to get creative.
I think there is one more question from Ada.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. First of all, thanks for the presentations. And I would like to ask two things to Guglielmo, especially based on the beginning of your activity. First of all, you told about other different companies in waste management. Between them, there are other ones who are working with recyclables, and if yes, if there are some competition between these different companies. And second, in your first phase, when you started looking for the prices of the recyclables, how did you face the difficulties about data scarcity or other lack of any kind of information? Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. So first, so the projects I introduced were mostly not run by companies, but by non-governmental organizations, which are, I'm sorry to say it because I work for NGOs and as a consultant, it's not that I'm against them, but which
we are recording, Guglielmo.
Yeah,
Watch out. Okay.
So definitely a needed support, but not so effective and not so long term. So luckily they're a bit stepping back right now. There's a very strong response from startups in Lebanon. There's a quite diverse response in Beirut particularly, but not only, in several municipalities. So yeah, there's competition. We love it. It's needed. I mean, we are here because we saw a problem, not really because we saw an opportunity to make money. So we are happy that there's a very competitive environment. And we had someone testing a solution similar to us, but there are several startups testing other types of solutions. So hopefully this will grow. And we are aiming to build a cooperative of all the startups working on recyclables. So hopefully there will be a collaboration, not only competition. Let's see if it will ever work or not. Going back to the first phase, first thing I did when I went to the camp in Barilias in Lebanon's mountains was getting in touch with those NGOs who started recycling projects. The only issue is that data is not commonly shared, because if you have data, you can easily apply for funds and initiate new projects. So in several cases, the people I contacted refused to share any data on the results of the facilities they had. These data were private and only shared with the donor. So this was a key limiting factor. So to collect data on the prices, I started going to industries by bike, which was quite interesting. And then I found the most valuable source of prices in the informal pickers. So I was just going around this valley, also by bike, stopping them, and with Google Translate asking them the pricing that they were getting, where they were selling, and this represented a good baseline for a price map. So they were the most valuable information source.
Oh yeah, it seems the most true kind.
You know the exact updated prices, and they will tell you exactly if it's going well or if it's reduced compared to last month. So they cannot afford bread anymore because it doesn't cover, because the plastic value decreased by 50%. So they have a history that is verbal, and that is very valuable.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks to you.
really, thank you to both of you, Catherine and Guglielmo. It was really, really interesting, also from my side, really. And yeah, I will invite you to the next ESIC meeting, also Catherine and Guglielmo, if you have any time. And the next one will be in 2 weeks, probably 3, because there is Easter time. So is the April 27th. And we will speak about the water resource management in data scarcity context. Again, data scarcity is often a key limit, so we will explore how to manage water resource in a better way. So thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
E grazie a tutti per la partecipazione.